Welcome to Psilocybin Says. Today, Eric and Courtney sit down on the couch and get really, really real, as always. They explore what it can look like to take ownership of your own experience. Now, what's meant by the word ownership in this context isn't just a reference to ideas like the possession of property. It's really a way to make contact with the value of every present moment, even moments of suffering. I think Eric and Courtney really hit the nail on the head with this one, and I found it challenging and expanding. You're listening to Psilocybin Says. To support it, subscribe on YouTube and podcasts, and stay connected on Instagram and TikTok.
Hello there, Courtney Rose. It's been a while. How you doing?
I am becoming more present in every moment is how I'm doing.
What happens when you're fully present?
Then I ascend out of my body
Oh, let's kind of keep a foot in the future then.
the heavens.
Yeah, let's hang out for a little bit longer. It's been a while since we sat down and had a conversation together in this way.
Wow. I feel like all of a sudden it's coming back to me how nice it's been to record podcasts with you and get to like just have intentional conversation with you, like a, container to do that in.
Without children pulling at our feet.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't happen with children pulling at our feet at all. Intentional conversation for an hour plus. And then, when we're not recording a podcast, we're like, trying to do all this other work. So
come on. The church runs itself. It's
yeah.
easy. It's not like it's
that's right.
business or anything.
I forgot.
It's
we
easy.
Just sit around and eat mushrooms.
Yeah. Duh.
And then everything happens.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Well, today we're talking about owning our experience. And the first thing I want to do is, extend a little bit of this conversation that we did not get to have intentionally this morning. Whenever I talk about being a parent for 36 effing years, that God give me the grace to live to see my daughter be at least 18 years old. At that time, I will be a parent of 36 years. And it's been, an ongoing going experience that, yes, I do occasionally get into a bit of a funk. But the reality that I want you to know is that when I'm sharing my struggle that comes up at times with, at this point, 20 years of crying and poop and wiping other people's butts and being at the beck and call of others, is that it is in no way a critique of you or any reflection on you. I'm owning it. I'm owning it when I say that, and I'm not trying to own it in a oh poor me way, or at least I'm trying to continue to move away from that. I'm trying to own it in a what the fuck was I thinking? But at the same time, knowing that what I was thinking was for you and I to have this that we have. This what we have with these kids and the craziness that it is, and all day, all the time, nonstop. It is what I want. I want it with you. And I was intentional about that with you. So I don't want you to ever think that I'm trying to put it off on you. I'm not. It's just, everybody wants to be recognized. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. And I guess that's really, if there's anything that I'm looking for at those times, is to hear thank you for doing that. Thank you for, making this commitment and going through this work for the sake of our family, our relationship. Because I want you in my life as long as I'm on this planet. And I know, and I knew that a crucial part of that for a young, beautiful, viral.
Whoa.
It's not viral. Not viral, sorry.
Oh, hey. Easy.
Fertile woman like yourself, that's going to have to be part of the equation. And so I own it and I love it. And it's also hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is hard. And it definitely has been a topic, a recurring, prominent topic, it seems like, for us in the last few days, is this deep desire to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And I get that. And it can feel really challenging in the moment, you know, when we're in relationships with people so closely as we are, like we almost, not every aspect of our lives, but almost every aspect of our lives we share together. Work, community, our friendships, relationships. It's like we're always in it together. And it feels like when you're feeling feelings or I'm feeling feelings, it can be hard to delineate like the connection, like feeling like, oh, that's my stuff.
Right.
What's your stuff? Like it must be my stuff too, is like how it feels right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to step away and sit and try and recognize what's mine versus what's yours, like that's challenging in itself with little kids. And you've been doing that for the last 20 years already, is like trying to find space to feel your own feelings. So it's a lot.
Yes, and that recognition ultimately has to come from ourselves. You know, and that's where I kind of got to after taking the kids out and to, you know, for their day of care outside the home. And even, you know, this conversation that was had last night over Zoom that had me kind of feeling away for a while, you know, unappreciated or whatever. And like the bottom line is if it starts with me. So while external validation is really important, I don't buy into this belief that we don't need to be externally validated. I don't. But it's not as important as our internal validation, which, you know, we can generate this loop. And I think that's what I am, when I make those comments, you know, about like, Jesus Christ, I've been doing this and I will be doing this. And like, I am, you know, looking for some external validation so that can get the wheels of momentum internally going, which is probably, it's not fair to you, especially if I don't speak it directly. If I don't say like, hey, can you tell me good job or tell me you appreciate that I have committed myself to, 18 more years of insanity. So I own that. I know that, you know, I can do better at communicating, and I can do better at validating myself. I didn't get up and meditate this morning. I own that. But what we really want to talk about here outside of the day-to-day life, is the owning our psychedelic experiences. This is something that I had no concept would be such an important part of the work that we do in facilitating these experiences for people. Mm-hmm. It is because I think in our day-to-day lives, we are very often accustomed to pointing the finger at somebody else, you know, like it's whoever else's fault, you know? And that's usually not the whole truth, if ever the whole truth. And it gets even more confusing in a psychedelic space. It gets even more confusing in a group psychedelic space. So yeah, that's what we want to talk about in particular, is owning our experience in the psychedelic. So what does that even, like, how does that like start to, what's that do inside your head when you start thinking about this? What do you reflect on your personal experiences when maybe you didn't own, you projected out, and as that maybe transitioned into taking more of an ownership? Share your journey in this kind of concept here.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, owning our experiences is a day-to-day practice, and not just in the psychedelic space, but since this is a psychedelic podcast, focusing on that aspect of it. And while also recognizing, though, that the psychedelic trip isn't just the day of, like we just had this 3-part series on what to expect before, during, and after a psychedelic experience, and recognizing that it's the in-between parts that continue to be psychedelic before and after a mushroom trip. That is the continuation of this psychedelic experience that we're integrating into our day-to-day life. So when I think about my journey and owning my experience in the psychedelic space, I think of a lot of the in-between days, between trips, where the trip is playing out and revealing itself in different ways. And which I feel like is what partly like what we've been going through in the last few days. Like for me, I microdosed yesterday, and that's the first time I've done that in a while. And that felt pretty psychedelic, even though it was only 0.05 grams. It still stirred some things up in me where it was hard for me to put my finger on, is this mine or is this somebody else's? Because it can feel really confusing. Like when you do have experience in being in abusive relationships, whatever spectrum that might look like, to if you're a person that has learned like a belief that I deserve to come after this other person, for instance, it can feel really confusing to own your own experience sometimes. And that's where I have gotten caught up in my past, is delineating like, you know, where is my responsibility in this situation and how does that look for me? If that means standing up for myself and like that's my responsibility, and voicing like these are my needs, and if like my needs aren't met, then this is what I'm going to need to do type of ownership, versus I did something that I see resulted in you being hurt and you like not feeling understood. And it's just like, it's not simple. Like it is, and it's not.
No.
Just to kind of front load this conversation.
It's simply not simple.
Yeah. Like we started out this conversation, you brought up what we were going through, this one thing that we were going through this morning. Which it's why I love the topic of communication. I love talking about ways in which we can learn to communicate better. Because owning our experience is more than a solo adventure. Like it takes two. It takes more than two. Sometimes it takes community and feedback to have that experience in and of itself. Like the dynamic and interplay of you telling me, wanting me to hear and see you. Like I've been doing this for 20 years and I've committed myself to doing this for more. Like, do you recognize like how much that this must mean to me to continue to do that? Is like now what I'm hearing after we've talked about it for a little bit. But like I want to have those experiences where I get a little confused about is that like, how do I interpret this? Like, are you telling me you don't want this? Are you telling me you just want to be seen? Are you like, what are you trying to communicate with me right now? I really enjoy like working that out with people that I love. So.
Yeah, same. And, you know, even people that I don't necessarily love, because we are each other. We are this human family trying to figure itself out. And yeah, that is actually what I am communicating when I'm saying like, Like, I see all this out in front of me. It's saying to you, this is how much I love you. This is how deeply I am committed to this life of ours together. And I could probably say that more clearly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want that experience of being able to say, like, this is some fucking hard shit right now, you know?
Yeah. And that's what I was going through in the conversations around our partner, like in the dynamic, like this past weekend. Like I was trying to get to hear from you. Like, I'm so freaking proud of you that you continue to show up and do your best in a scenario that there's very little like support and understanding around. And like, you continue to like show up and do the thing that is misunderstood and like confusing and hard to navigate sometimes. And that's like all I wanted to hear, honestly. Like, I see you so hard, and like, thank you. That's all I wanted.
Yeah, well, I do, for sure. Yeah, in so many ways you have continued to show up for these kinds of difficulties, and you know, it's like there are difficulties that we willingly take on out of a love. You know, everything's going to have a balance, and you know, so the things that we enjoy the most are also going to come with, you know, a huge level of responsibility and commitment, and working through the ugly stuff as well as the challenging stuff as well. So, and that's the psychedelic experience. Again, reiterate that this is very seldomly, or maybe 50% of the time, I don't know, but it's, you know, people don't just have like rainbow unicorn trips all the time. They're fucking messy. You get in there and you get exposed to your internal world, and a lot of times we don't realize that's our internal world, you know? Yep. And when, for instance, like you expressed some of the challenges of the dynamic relationship dynamic that we have going on, you know, instead of understanding you just expressing this challenge, I perceived it as a criticism of me somehow, because of historical criticism around this topic and all that, and some of our personal history and all that. So integration in all aspects of life. It's not just a psychedelic thing. We're constantly, hopefully, trying to integrate our understanding and our experiences so that we can have a more holistic perspective on this big, wild ride that we're on. Let's get into some psychedelic experiences that we maybe didn't own. I've certainly got mine I can reflect back on. One of the more humorous ones that comes to my mind is that night with our singing friend, where I was just miserable as fuck the whole night and blaming it on this person and their trip. And then years later, I came to having a similar experience that it started out like that. I was like, oh God, this is going the same direction. But I consciously took ownership of my experience, and it unfolded into something amazing. So Courtney and I are having this dose with a couple of friends up in Indiana years and years ago. And one of our friends just started with just this gibberish singing all night, and it just went on and on and on and on, like didn't even take a breath. And I was just like so fucking angry. I was so angry that someone was ruining my experience. And it persisted for years. After that experience, I would look back on it and would still feel that frustration, you know, and looked at it as it was this individual doing this thing to me. And I don't know, I guess it's just a cumulative experience where I started to understand that whatever is coming up in the mushroom space is supposed to be there, and it's all equal. And had a similar start to an experience here recently that, you know, my buddy kind of went into this singing absurdity, nonsensical. I thought, oh my God, it's going to be another one of those nights. And then I took ownership of my experience and said, okay, that's happening over there. What's happening over here? What can I do How can I embrace what's happening? And when I did that, it opened this doorway of understanding the absurd as a portal to enlightenment. And I ended up having one of the most profound and powerful mystical experiences of my life. And so when I look back at that early experience, thinking, God, what did I limit myself from experiencing that night? You know, and not only that, but for years, because I will continue to gain from that most recent trip. I will continue to gain more from that experience. So seems like I probably lost years of benefit from that original experience that I continued to, you know, put off on somebody else, put the responsibility on someone else. So that was the first experience that I can immediately recall where I didn't take ownership and I was able to see the negative effect after a long time.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And as you were sharing about that, I was thinking about the teaching that you've been bringing up recently from Bashar around the power of paradox, and how, you know, when there's one side of the coin, there's the other side of the coin. Like they're always existing together. So if you're having this really, really dark experience, you can be rest assured that on the other side of that, there's a really awesome, bright, like amazing experience wrapped up in it. And
can I just real quick, just because you said on the other side, I just would like to specify, I think what you mean is not the other side necessarily, like at the end or at some other point, the other side that exists right now in the same moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like a coin.
Yeah.
They're both existing together. Just, it's like the perspective that we take on, like looking at one side, turning it, looking at the other side. Which side do we want to put our energy into and, put our energy into and get more from. So like I heard you say you've maybe lost, like in the years that you were reflecting on that experience as a loss.
I just did it again, didn't
like,
I?
yeah, I would I would invite you to look at the other side of that coin, even, because like sometimes it takes that long sometimes to feel out and open up to the lessons that are there. And so and I heard a teaching recently from this meditation teacher, Surya is her first name, I forget her last name, but she was talking about wherever there is shame present, there's blame. Those are things that exist together as well. And like always when somebody's shaming you, they're blaming something external to them. And then when we allow shame to own our experience, we're blaming something external to us when we allow that to take over, and just recognizing that as well. Because I do think it plays into this conversation of owning our experience. And like when we can do that, take those baby steps to talking through, like, hold on, like what just happened? Like what did I do? How did I contribute to ending up in this situation that I'm experiencing now? Finally getting to the point of realizing like, wow, I really did have a big role to play in this experience, which I originally thought when it first happened was somebody else's fault, somebody else's problem. They did it to me. And really, like, no, I chose this. I, you know, through subtle ways, chose to have that experience. So yeah, your experience with our friend years ago.
And I'm still blaming
Seems like
him.
you wanted it.
Damn it.
You knew his personality. You invited him there.
Well, we were early friends. We're still getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And it's you know, that whole thing, like in the trip space, just so much stuff can come out, and there are so many different manifestations of history that can be confusing or off-putting to other folks. So it's not like, this is not a critique on his personality at all.
For sure.
My buddy that I just had this recent dose with, it's one of my, I fucking love this guy. I fucking love him. And he did the same thing. So it's not a critique on the individual's personality by any means. But what about you? What about are some particularly psychedelic experiences that you can recall where you maybe didn't take ownership for the nature of the experience?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. So ranging in intensity, I feel like, without being too specific about the unfoldings of a trip, like I've had a recurring experience in trips that you and I have had together where I feel like I was tricked into the mushroom experience, like whether it was like me blaming the mushroom for tricking me, which is the more prominent experience that I've had when it comes to the feeling of being tricked and like that I'm being used by someone external to me, and I didn't choose it. That's happened quite a few times. And when that's happening, it is, like you said, it's my internal world coming to light. It's like how I had been operating on the day to day. Like, I don't like, this is uncomfortable. And instead of owning that, no, this is just really hard for me right now. And I can figure it out. I can figure this out. I've got resources. I can ask for help, doing things that have been historically really hard for me to do, asking for help from people, accepting help from people, instead turning that around and being like, I'm scared to ask for help, so I'll find reasons to blame people for not allowing me, not like letting me be helped and blaming it on them. They would never help me, or here's why they'd never help me, and kind of like being angry about that at someone instead of like just acknowledging it. Like, it is hard for me to ask for help and receive it. And I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put myself out there and get the help. Yeah, that's what's come up for me in the mushroom space. And even yesterday when I had that microdose, I felt this, and I hear about this frequently from people who've gone through our subtle sacrament program. And yeah, I've heard from people like, is it normal to feel like sad or this like, like up this rising of hard emotion for like 24 hours after, like the following day, just feeling this sadness that's there. And I feel like this is not talked about. I feel like when it comes to microdosing,
I thought more time microdose, you just felt really good and creative. And
yeah,
productive.
that's the prominent conversation. It's like, take a supplement and like feel better. And it really
your trauma without
just
any work.
doesn't work out. It doesn't work out like that. So I'd love to shift the conversation around that. But yesterday I took the microdose and about 2 hours later, I started feeling anger. Like the anger was, I could feel it just coming up inside of me. And I'd already had that feeling like in the couple days before yesterday. But I thought I had, at that point in the day yesterday, I thought, okay, like I'm good now. I'm kind of like moving past this. And then I took the microdose again, very small, 0.05 grams. Most people,
that's like a mini microdose.
Many people would not even feel that at all. But I swear, even smelling and tasting the tiniest bit of a mushroom, I can like tap into some like really intense experiences I've had. So I started to feel this rising up like from my stomach into my chest and in my throat, this like like get it out. It felt like I got to get it out. It's got to come out of me right now. And it started to feel more and more intense and urgent. And that's when, like right before, when was it? Like, I don't know. There's just that point in the day where I was just like, I need to scream. I just felt really upset. I feel like I need to be heard. Nobody's seeing me. Nobody is recognizing me. Nobody. And it was the thoughts that have been on repeat, that were coming out in my face. And it sucked. It was really hard. And it didn't feel like I needed to own it. I felt like other people need to own their stuff, to me, is how I felt. And when that feeling comes up, like I just feel like screaming at these certain people because they're not taking responsibility, and they're in my life and they're affecting me. And
it's highly likely she's talking about me.
Yeah, that's why I'm pointing at you. Yeah. And so when that's the experience, it like that's a real tough one for me to, with a history of allowing people that I care about, with me saying, yes, please walk right over me. Sure. I can handle it. I can take the abuse. I can take it. Just bring it on. And all the while never letting people know, these people that are walking all over me, like never letting them know that this isn't what I want. Like, actually, you have no idea that I'm not okay with this because I never said anything to let you know. So then forming this story in my head, well, clearly they don't care about me because here they go walking all over me. Here they go again.
How did you perceive me walking all over you yesterday?
I felt, not that I felt like that you were walking all over me yesterday, but feeling like, I wanted to be heard. There's that one specific thing, like I wanted to hear and feel legitimately acknowledged for, that in my head, I hadn't felt acknowledged for. I felt like, like you had said the words, but I didn't feel it from you. I felt like you were just saying those things knowing that you should, but not actually feeling that you did see me, and like the level of energy and attention I've put into growing and being present in our relationship.
I think as I think back to this morning and my feelings around kids and all that stuff as well, like you have absolutely on multiple occasions expressed a understanding and gratitude, and there comes a certain point where the one who is expected to give that recognition has got to be feeling, to a certain extent, like, I have recognized this multiple times. Like, when is it going to be enough? Like, surely you feel like at some times, like, I've told Eric 100 fucking times that I appreciate his commitment to this family. And so am I really having to say this again? Because we're just living a normal life. Like, the kids are just wanting everything at once, like they always do, and that's where this conversation around, I don't want to say whose turn it is, but when it's legitimately time for me to recognize myself, right? Instead of wanting you to repeat the same thing that you've repeated over and over, yeah. So just kind of looking at that, when that very difficult to define boundary of ownership and responsibility falls on one side or the other. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one reason I love the work, Byron Katie's The Work, and her Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, where the idea is that you're identifying a thought that you're having that keeps coming up, keeps repeating, like, he doesn't care about me. Like, he doesn't think that, he doesn't see how good of a partner he has. Identifying it and then like asking yourself, is it true? How can you absolutely know it's true? And then who are you with that thought? What kind of person are you with that thought? Like that thought for me, just picking that one, like he doesn't recognize how good of a partner I am. Like when I think that, I feel anger. I feel unappreciated. I just feel like walking away. I'm not appreciated. And then like looking at who am I without that thought? When I don't have that thought, I feel light. I feel like smiling. I feel happy and appreciated and loved and supported by life when I'm not thinking that thought. And then, so just recognizing the difference, that almost recognizing that we have the ability to identify a thought and conceive of a state where we don't have it. Just to like tap into that and then turning it around, because like the power of paradox, where there's the thought, there's the opposite thought, there's all these different dimensions of that thought that exist at the same time. So like, I don't recognize how good of a partner I am. Like you said, like I'm the one that needs to acknowledge and believe and feel how good of a partner I am, because I'm believing it. When I'm believing that thought, he doesn't recognize it. It's it's like I'm also not like I'm not recognizing how good of a partner I am, because if I did, I'd be way more confident and not so defensive and angry. And then like, you know, he doesn't recognize how good of a partner he is, or like I don't recognize how good of a partner he is. So
this is one of the most challenging things as a facilitator of psychedelic work. It's one of the most challenging things that I've come up against, is trying to help people see that they are creating their circumstances. They're creating their mental state. And I wonder if you have any advice or thoughts around that. You're pretty good at it, but I don't know that I can like identify necessarily how you do it.
Well, with that, looking at just looking at myself and my own journey in becoming more conscientious and aware every day for hopefully eternity. There's a balance of recognizing like, yes, I do create my reality, and also a gentleness that it can't all happen at once. Like, yeah, I do have responsibility in the things that I can control, in my actions and my responses. And also, that doesn't mean that I need to always get it right, or like I should have done better. I should have done something differently. There's a difference between being open to seeing where I can shift my beliefs, and then like thinking, oh, I need to like figure out how to own all my beliefs right now, and like I shouldn't have ever done that, and Like, why aren't I better? Why aren't I better at this? Like, why, like, do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like there's a balance of acknowledging that we are humans living this life and making mistakes and failing. And like, it's hard. It's really hard. And just because we have lessons to learn and things we can do better, like that means that you did perfectly. You're doing perfectly. You're going to make mistakes tomorrow as you try and grow. And that's great. Like, you don't, like, I feel like people, what's tough is hearing that you created this situation and you're like this feeling of being blamed. Like, now I should feel guilty because I created this. Like the concept of victim blaming. Like, no. That's not the point. So, I mean, just going back to like Byron Katie is a beautiful example. If you watch her facilitate the work, as she calls it, with people, her step by step being like, of course, like you're just a child, like you were a child when you adopted this belief. Like you're just trying to understand the world. You're just trying to figure out like, okay, here I am and I'm being talked to like this and it feels horrible. Like, and I'm going to try and figure out how to survive and be in this situation right now and protect myself with these beliefs. Like, of course you have this belief. Of course you do. And of course your mother, who is like abusing you, she's coming from this horrible like series of beliefs that she adopted and she's trying to figure it out. You know, like we're all just legit doing the best that we can in any given moment. So just setting the shame game aside.
But it's still like that. It's really tough, man. Like when I'm working, it's easier with myself. It is because I've been doing this for long enough that I am more capable of recognizing when I am misappropriating blame instead of redirecting responsibility back at myself. But I'm particularly thinking of like, you know, facilitators or people who are supporting other people. This is something that I don't like, you know, like I said, I didn't see it coming when I started doing this work, even though it's like a no-brainer that it's there. And there's probably a lot of people out there. I've actually talked with one of our ministers recently that had an experience working with a therapist, and the therapist blamed the facilitator for the difficult experience when it was clearly not the facilitator's responsibility or whatever. And this individual is then asking me, like, how do I reflect it back to her so that she can take responsibility for the nature of her experience? And it's tough, and it generally takes a long time. It's not something that happens in one conversation, right? And so I guess that's what I'm curious as to your
tough
experience and how you perceive that kind of stuff. And then it gets even more difficult. Well, in like that instance that I just, you know, if you're working with people and they blame the mushroom or they blame another participant in a session, but when they begin to blame you, the facilitator, it adds a whole nother level of difficulty and maybe an impossibility. I don't know. Redirecting.
That is a tough situation. And that is one big, ginormous reason that in our best practices, there is another person there present that's holding space. Like
even in integration, not just in the session
even in
itself.
integration, because it is real freaking hard when you don't, as a person who has just had that experience with the mushroom, who is sorting through that experience of this hurts too bad for me to own, that like, this is me that's repeating this.
There's no way I would do this to myself.
That is wrapped up in the healing, in the deep healing of this work with the mushroom. It's part of it. So like having another person that was a witness to that, that can say, you know, like I see, almost like a mediator that can see, okay, I see how when you're saying this and this happened, like, and then I like, this is how I saw it, and helping to ask questions and recognize like the facilitator can, as we've seen, do things that are, not the thing to do, not helpful at all.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that the facilitator did do something that was like not helpful.
Well, and I have done that myself. I can fully acknowledge that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So like one, being willing to just sit with it and be like, I am really considering what you're saying right now.
Yes.
I really am, because I'm not perfect at all. And this is my work. This is my journey too, that, this was my intention to hold this space for you in this way. And I'm hearing that you didn't feel like I did that. So like, I want to acknowledge that you're feeling that way. That's the last thing that I want you to feel. It's the opposite, the complete opposite. And like, I know in this recent experience of this facilitator that's coming to you, like I know her heart, I know damn sure she put her heart into that session with that person. So, and even still, we mess up. We're human. So yeah, just taking a look at that and asking like, or acknowledging, I could have done this better. I could have, I really could have. And, I'm committing to learn and do better. And also like you came into this wanting to grow, and it's also my responsibility to help give you my perspective on that experience. And if you still want to grow and hear my perspective, that's what I'm here for. So do you? If you don't, then I will leave and we'll just have to sort this out on our own and in our own communities and friendships and stuff, which would be painful. But like, yeah, just kind of in any dynamic of communication, there's responsible parties and ways in which we all contributed. So just recognizing that's really important.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's some people aren't going to be open to, they're not ready to grow.
There is still at least one person out there who's probably blaming me for not having a trip, who took like several doses of mushrooms, relatively high doses. It was very obvious to multiple people that their resistance to diving into their own dark material prevented them from actually having an experience, and they memorialized their blame in Reddit comments about me. It's I guess like it is what it is. There's a part of me that feels a little grief there because it seems like a missed opportunity, but at the same time, it's similar to that, trip that I started explaining early on, that if I take that perspective, then I'm missing the opportunity right now to learn and grow from it.
Yeah. This is a crazy life that we're living.
It's messy. It's messy. I mean, like big topics though, I get hung up on the global stuff, and then I've really been trying to put some heart reflection on this. It's like I get really, really frustrated, and I can get angry. Like when this whole when it was announced that the United States was sending cluster bombs to the Ukraine, which are outlawed in over 100 countries. They kill children. They leave behind munitions that explode later on, taking innocent lives. And to think that the United States, that continues to at least preach itself to be this moral bastion of fucking whatever global goodness. I get really pissed, and I get even more pissed when it comes from what I have always perceived, even though I've been registered independent since 18, I have, for the majority of my life, or majority of my adult life, I have considered the Democratic Party to be the party of the people. And so now to see that it's the shell game is completely on display, and that none of these politicians give a fuck about an individual. They only care about lining their own pockets and their own families and their own personal agendas. I can find myself getting really pissed. But when I sit with it, I realize that the anger is really directed at myself for not doing what I could have done, maybe. But then at the same time, there's this conflict of what can you do, you know? And when I take an even bigger step back, I am anyway in my situation able to look and say, okay, I may have not been politically involved. I may have not been directing the leadership, but the work that I've been doing with the mushroom, I know has been helping to broaden horizons, see a more holistic perspective of humanity, to bring down some of those barriers of the other, and that allows me to feel a level of applied responsibility and kind of can set aside that anger. But I do wonder, particularly on the big topics, how does the average person take responsibility for our role in what seems like a machine that is far beyond our influence?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that unloading the dishwasher yesterday. Like, specifically, so I was thinking about, like, if I were to get on the phone with a certain friend, that she would probably launch right into a political conversation that, like, I feel like she spins out around, and it has me not wanting to talk with her because I guess I've avoided like talking with her because I feel like the way that we see the world in that way, like focusing on, like, she tends to focus on those big issues which feel out of my control, like in a direct way. Like, putting my energy there feels like a waste and a wash to me. Whereas she puts a lot of her energy there. Like, I'd rather put my energy into what I can control and looking at my circumstances and my environment and looking at, like, what shifts can I make here that will radiate out into my community. And yeah, the like political conversations I do struggle with because it's so hard for me to know what's what. Like, the climate of manipulation is so convoluted for me that I do get really emotional when I start to get into it, and then I get confused.
So, or do you avoid it because you like? Yeah, I mean, I think there's something deeper to explore there, and the avoidance of it. Is that an attempt to neglect your responsibility to the situation? Do you think?
I feel like it is because I feel so duped. I've felt so duped by institutions, like, from like what you're saying, me believing the narrative, thinking that, oh, this is what's good for me. I'm believing that I'm being told I need a college education. I need to shell out a lifetime of debt for this experience. Like, I believe that I need to vote for this person because the things that they're saying they'll do sound exactly like what me and my family needs. And then to find out later that like they had no intention of actually going through with those things, and feeling overwhelmed by feeling like I would have to dedicate my life to politics to begin to feel confident in knowing what to believe, that I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I don't believe what you're saying. I don't believe what you're saying. I don't know you. I'm probably never going to know you. I'm never going to meet you. Like, so I don't believe you. So I'd rather just not even hear it, because it all just sounds like you're all just saying what you think me and my community wants to hear. And it sounds great. Sounds really great when you're saying it. But I don't believe it.
Is that just another example of putting the blame off on somebody else? Putting the onus on somebody else? You're lying to me, therefore I'm not going to get engaged.
Putting the onus on the person that I think is lying to me.
The politicians or whatever. Yeah, the system. Is that owning your experience? Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel good. Like I do feel like there's another way. I feel like there is another way for me to engage and be aware of what's going on in my community on like the scale of governance. I do feel like there's another way.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the flip side of that question is in putting the responsibility for the governance on the institution or politicians, is that actually a, disowning our responsibility? I think that's, when we're looking to these people to save us, when we're looking to these people to lead the way, it's like, oh, okay, well, here, you take the ball and run with it. And then when you fuck it up, well, then I get to blame you. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. That feels pretty right there. Yeah. I guess it is just a not knowing. It's the feeling of not knowing and not feeling like I've got the energy to know. Yeah. Right. Like right now, that feels okay with me. Like it feels like weighing what I want to put my energy into and learn more about and become more, like affluent, knowledgeable in like the realm of like politics and our government. It's not appealing enough to me, or it doesn't feel like there's a payout valuable enough to me to like dive into it. But I'm also open to see that I'm missing something for myself.
There is the reality that the masses, and we're actually, it's so interesting, and this has the potential to be a challenging. It has potential to, it's a trigger, but there, in several ways, we are starting to see that we, the people, are the ones that make the difference, right? Like you can see it, you can look back at the civil rights movement and a lot of this stuff. Something that has kind of been in my face lately, thanks to TikTok. And you probably have no fucking idea. You've probably heard nothing about this. I don't know, because you don't engage in some of this stuff. But have you seen this whole thing about this? I'm not a Mel Gibson fan, whatever. Like, but
oh gosh,
have you seen this thing about the movie that I think I don't know if he helped produce it or promote it or what, but this, I think it's called Song of Freedom or Sounds of Freedom or something like this. Have you heard of it? You haven't? Okay, so this is a documentary that's been done on child trafficking, human trafficking children for sex work, right? It was produced by a kind of a low level, nobody, no unknown production company, and it very much seems like there has been a concentrated effort to prevent this movie from being viewed in mass. Like there are dozens and dozens and dozens of TikTok videos that I've seen of people saying, like, we went to go see this movie and 30 minutes in, it stops playing, they turn the lights on, the air conditioning shuts off, and like, I'm not getting into a bunch of conspiracy shit, but I believe people's experience. Like we talk about this in terms of abuse. Like I want to hear people's experience, and I want to trust it as much as I can in the immediate. And you got some crazy woman talking about, reptilians on an airplane kind of shit. I'm gonna question that deeply. But when you've got dozens and dozens of people from different places around the country reporting the same thing, it does start to raise questions. And the fact that this movie, like, what is this not an incredibly important topic? That there are tens of thousands of children that go missing in the United States every year, and we have no idea where they go. Like, that seems like, if we can hunt down a fucking bin Laden in a spider hole in Iraq, how can we not find, 20,000 or 10,000 children that go missing in sex trafficking? And there has been no, there have been no promotions for this movie from Hollywood proper, right? It's all been grassroots. It is the number one movie in theaters right now. It beat Indiana Jones, apparently, as of yesterday or the day before, right? The new Indiana Jones movie. And so what that signifies to me is that we, the people down here, do have impact. And this is the challenging rub, particularly around the, large scale social problems, and politics in particular, but just look at any large scale drug abuse, all the kind of crazy stuff that we're seeing, suicide, veteran suicide. We tend to look to these institutions to solve the problem when we know in our heart that they've created the problem in many ways, right? The veterans that are suffering from PTSD en masse, the rates of veteran suicide daily, it just came back out. It's gone up a certain percentage. Like it's increasing daily, the number of veterans, and it's the government that, like, they're to blame for this. Tricky, but they're not solving the problem. If anything, they're creating it. And so by looking to the institutions that cause the problem to fix the problem, then we're again taking the onus and the responsibility for our experience off of ourselves and putting it on others, when we can see historically there are numerous examples of when the people that care got together and took responsibility for our collective experience. We were able to shift things. And we're actually seeing that in psychedelics, right? You see people, we were arrested, right? And we could have said, oh, well, blame the system, psychedelics shouldn't be illegal, and then we just kind of fall back into daily life and go do some humdrum job and forget that, this is our God-given right. But I think that there was an aspect of us taking responsibility for this social situation that compelled us to continue pushing forward and continue taking responsibility for our daily experience, and thereby creating change. And so this weird line of engagement and disengagement, particularly again from these large topics that seem too big to tackle, it's challenging.
So, yeah, I would then pose to that, who is the system?
We are the system. Yeah.
So when we say it's the institutions that's creating the problem, that's actually us.
And our neglect of the institutions.
To even say that we can see that we do have the ability to impact, it's ignoring the fact that we are we are the institution. We are the system that is every single moment of the day impacting. It's not even that we have the ability to, it's that
we are doing
we
it.
are. And I guess that's where
y'all do hear me being corrected by this woman all the time, right? And taking it and being like, yeah, you're right. I just want to point that out.
Can we just clip that and just put it on loop on every website that you're listed on? Yeah.
White man acknowledging the woman is right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, that's why, like, when we talk about politics and like, I guess that's the conversation. That's the conversation that I am not interested in, is the one where we have to change the system before changing ourselves.
Damn.
That's the part that I walk away from, because it doesn't compute to me. We don't need to wait until a law changes 15 years from now to recognize that it starts with us. I don't need to wait to try and figure out a better situation for my children, schooling wise, to wait until JCPS changes the way they do school.
Well, that's an interesting subject that you bring up, because that is has been a topic of conversation here, where I don't know that we have really addressed that internally, right? We continue to, you and I, as we have this conversation, we continue to talk about our frustration with the situation, and that our kids got to go back into public school, and the public schools are like this, and there's no windows, and they sit all the time, and all that.
Yeah.
And you and I, in our conversations, tend to put that, onus out there.
Right. I'm acknowledging the difference in, like, I just had a conversation with a mom whose son goes to school with our son at the YMCA the other day. I ran into her and she started off the conversation complaining about JCPS and that, like, she was just complaining about it. Like, well, here, like, this is what me and my kids are going to be subjected to until, for the next 15 years. And it was interesting to me to notice that she at no point recognized that there was another option, any other option. Whereas, like, I'm recognizing I do not like this system that we have all created. And we as a society have been like, yep, well, this is just what, like, sure thing. I'm just going to keep sending my kid there because, like, I'd rather not get creative, or I don't even know that I can get creative. I don't even know that it's an option for me to do anything differently. So I'm just going to, like, keep checking, like, I'm okay with this. This is this is how I'm going to send my kids to school. This is how this is how I want my kids to spend their day. This is just what we're going to do. This is what we are continuing to accept and create and say yes to every single year. Whereas if, like, half of the people that send their kids to JCPS were like, I'm going to homeschool, would JCPS change? Hell yeah, they would, because they want that money. Like, it would change. If we change the way that we spend our dollars, like, if we start spending it on yoga and meditation and psychedelics, then how is the government, the system, going to change the way in which they make their money? They're going to change the way they make their money. They're going to change the way based on people are actually voting in real time every day, not once a year.
So have we just en masse convinced ourselves that we have no ability to affect change? Meanwhile, we are unconsciously affecting change. Like, where did this kind of, can we look, is this just the human condition, or can we look at a period of time where it became more. I mean, I can certainly, it feels like as we bought into or as we contributed into mass media, that we co-created this kind of self-brainwashing. But I'm just trying to look at a time, the thing that comes to my mind, and most people will have no reference for this, but Haile Selassie, this Ethiopian emperor who I've studied quite a bit, when he was emperor, I remember reading in his autobiography how he was telling the people, like, if you want the potholes fixed, then you're going to have to get out there and fix them, because we can't fix every fucking pothole, And when I first read that, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, but now as I really start to conceive of what an effective governance looks like, and we're talking about creating this governance system for sanctuary that is not top down, that is somehow everybody that is vested is contributing, then those things start to make more sense. And I guess where I start to get a little overwhelmed is that, just like schooling is a great topic here, where I feel a huge responsibility for my children in what they're experiencing daily. And then, like, the same thing with the food, right? And the same thing with spirituality. It becomes a lot for one person to deal with, or for a small community to deal with. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, what kind of examples we can point to of, and we've strayed significantly from the psychedelic experience, but at the same time, it's all wrapped up in together, right? The psychedelic experience is just showing us the daily experience. It's just highlighting what we're experiencing on a daily basis. So I think it is very valuable to extrapolate this out into everyday life. And I'm just curious, can you think of examples or times when we have collectively took responsibility for our collective state? Does that make sense what I'm asking there?
That's a good question.
I initially,
are you thinking of something?
Well, I go back to World War II is the first thing that pops in my head. The civil rights movement comes up. This psychedelic movement comes up.
Yeah. Well, so like as a collective is like all at once being like, let's do something about this particular thing right now.
Yeah. I mean, war is the first thing that comes to my mind, like that we should be collectively working on, because we've got a handful of people that are, at our permission, are, murdering innocent people. And so it's a big challenging topic, but yeah, I'm just kind of like questioning how deep we can go with this and what examples we've had. We have to have an example. We have to have at least the imagination before it can become reality, if not an example.
Well, what I imagine is a collective example, like a collective of people that are, which I think is happening right now, is a collective of people that are just sick of feeling manipulated, without their best interests in mind. There's a lot of people, more people than maybe ever, that don't trust the system, that are with internet access and social media, are seeing that what's presented to us at face value is not to be, we have to ask more questions, like a lot more questions in order to get to the bottom of like mass media presentations and what's being told to us. So I feel like there is an uprising of people that want to know for themselves what's what. And the psychedelic renaissance is a huge part of people being like, I want to connect with what's real. I don't believe this. I don't believe this. The therapy institution, the medical industrial complex, drugs, like pharmaceuticals have gotten me feeling like I've gone backwards. Like, and this is not helping me. I want to connect with what's real. And what's real is something that is given to me by nature, by God, or whatever, like that feels for the person. Like, give me something that's real, that isn't someone trying to manipulate me for their best interest. So like, I feel like that's why mushrooms are just blowing up in popular culture. This feeling, the symbol of something real that's going to communicate with me like a genuineness about myself and my life and how to move forward. And that's what I imagine as being this authentic, like truth seeking collective, just starting with at home, like starting with like, let's talk with each other.
And that again is in large part the impetus behind this myself ministry, because it has to start in our own immediate self and sphere and then begin to radiate out. But wow, it's a big deal, big topic. And, like, it's very easy, I think, for us to, once we start to realize that we are collectively, suffering from Stockholm syndrome, where we have loved our oppressor for so long, it's like in just your own personal internal healing when you realize that you've been subjecting yourself to, like you said, maybe abusive behavior or letting people walk all over you or whatever. There's a tendency for that guilt to surface. And then what do you do when guilt surfaces? We tend to avoid it. We tend to look away from it. But if we can kind of get past that initial sense of guilt that prevents us from making the next step, which is engagement, right? Then we can actually start to affect change. And boy, religion, looking back, and as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about this, how like we've, the devil made me do it, or we have collectively put the responsibility even before humankind, even before we put the collective responsibility on a human or on an institution, we have this scapegoat of the devil, that, I love that, was the Rolling Stones song, the Sympathy for the Devil, I've always loved that, in that, it's all just doing what it's supposed to do. We're dividing it out like there's good and evil, and there is really just this process that we're engaged in. And we can certainly define aspects of the process that we don't appreciate. But if we just continue to point the finger at the part that we don't appreciate, then we're just highlighting that. We're just, giving more energy to that. I appreciate what you're saying about, just kind of where you put your attention and the energy going there, starting with the home and what you can do in your personal life to expand out. And at the same time, I think we can approach it from both ends,
Yeah.
Well,
How do you feel this conversation went?
I'm taking responsibility for the fact that we did not have an outline and that we did not talk about it much beforehand, but I'm acknowledging also that because we've been having these conversations for so long and we've been exploring this work so deeply for so long that I think that it probably is a valuable conversation for others to listen to who might not have thought so deeply on these topics as we have, and done kind of the work together and with our community and et cetera. So,
yeah, it's highlighted for me how like honestly how much I do take responsibility for my own life, and we do as a unit. I was reflecting on at some point our day-to-day as compared to the majority of people in America's day-to-day, where we have put ourselves in a position of thinking for ourselves and asking a lot of questions with our community on a daily basis. And how there's been times in my life where I've just kind of not wanted to, like I've gotten tired. And like when we got back from Jamaica, I mean, out of necessity, I went back to work for just to have some money coming in. And also I was really wanting to be relieved of thinking for myself for a little bit. Honestly, I just felt tired, and it is a lot of energy. It can be a lot of energy questioning.
I think that's really important to note. I think it's really important to note for folks that it is hard. It takes a constant returning, which can be exhausting. So yeah, good job.
Thanks. You too.
Yeah, I think I do a pretty good job overall of taking responsibility for, more so, anyway, particularly for my emotional state. That's what I really am, in the last couple of years, as someone who has tended to blame externals for my internal state, coming to an awareness that's just it's just never the case. Honestly, it's never the case. What's Bashar's, I love, who says circumstances don't matter, only your state of being matters. And that's true. Like, people very often cite, I forget what the title of the book is, Victor Hugo's book, where he wrote from being in a concentration camp, and, his perspective was so different that he was able to impact millions of people through his writing. And I think the list goes on. And if you look at the people who have affected change, or the communities that have really affected massive change, it's not been the communities, it's not been the individuals who pointed a finger at the system. It's been the individuals who took ownership and responsibility for their state of being, and then brought that state of being out into the broader world. So that's what I want to try to do more and more.
Yeah, same.
Sweet. Hopefully our listeners will find this conversation valuable, and maybe choose to, I don't want to say follow our lead, but follow their own internal lead.
Yes, do that. Definitely do that. Thanks for listening.
As always.